Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us on the fifth installment of the Transformative Leader book study. It is great to have you. We are in a slightly different setting, and I'll explain why a little bit later. But nonetheless, it's really great to have you, and we're going to dig right in. I'm going to just share just ask you about a couple of things. I want to make sure that if you have any questions or comments, once again, this might be your first time. If you've been with us, you know the drill. Go ahead and put it in the chat box or Q&A box. And Naveed is with us today, so he's going to check out those questions and comments. And from time to time, I'm going to pause to answer your questions and address any comments that you have. We are also live on Facebook, so if you're joining us there, Naveed will also be taking a look at the comments there. Feel free to interact with us. So we're really looking forward to being with you there as well. And just a couple of other things that I wanted to check on before we got into the last two one-point lessons that we're going to get into, and that is I wanted to just see if you had a chance to practice any of the stuff that we talked about last time. We talked specifically about 100% commitment, and I'm just curious how many of you were able to observe some things for yourself relative to 100% commitment versus 50-50. So just put that in the chat for us, and I'm going to just pause for a moment and see if we have any comments coming in, and so Naveed can tell us if we've got some comments there.
Okay, we have one comment from Jill. It's about last week's discussion. So she says, last week's discussion of commitments seemed to be defined differently amongst participants. So where does integrity fit in with commitments?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. So the point is that you want your word and your actions to line up. So when you give your word to something, you want that to line up with your actions. You want to follow through. And if that's the case, then you have integrity, right? So integrity is not always about doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Integrity in this sense is basically that I can count on you to do what you said you were going to do. So in a sense, if you're making commitments and not meeting commitments, then you're not in integrity in the eyes of others, but just as importantly, and perhaps more importantly, in your own eyes. You don't relate to yourself as a person of integrity. So this is why it's so important to either commit and follow through or not commit and be very clear about it. And so the question that was raised last time was, one of the questions was, well, what's wrong with 50-50? I mean, just because I can't commit to the whole thing, should I just let the whole thing go? What's wrong with 50-50? And what I was explaining there was that, look, it's okay, it's perfectly fine for you to commit to only 20% or 50% of the scope of something that somebody is asking you to commit to. But when you commit to that portion of it, then be 100% committed to that. That is what I call 100% commitment. And that's how it relates to integrity. I hope that answers the question. Jill, thank you so much for that question. Do we have anything else, Naveed? And you might be on mute, Naveed.
No, nothing so far.
Okay, great. Got it. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into the last two one-point lessons that we're going to address today. One of them being leadership is all about be-there-ship. On page 147, and the last one is called Just Be It on page 201. Now, this is actually the session 5 of 5 sessions, but we also have one bonus session scheduled next week. Many of you have already registered for that. If you haven't, you can do so. What we are going to do is we're going to send one email to all the people who have signed up for our book study and the Destined to Thrive series. And so we're actually putting you on a mailing list, and we're going to send you an email to invite you to sign up for that bonus session if you haven't. Now, At the bottom of that email, there is an option to unsubscribe, and it won't hurt our feelings. We are certainly not suggesting that you ought to be totally interested in everything that we do. If you are, then you're going to hear from us about the different things we got going on. We won't spam you, we won't email too much. But if you don't really want to be on our list, feel free to unsubscribe, and there's no hard feelings about that. We just don't want to be a bother to somebody who does not really want to receive an email from us. But nonetheless, you will receive that email, so we will do that. And next week's session, the kind of the bonus session, is going to be all about kind of how it all comes together. We've covered a lot of different things about the culture of an organization, about the mindset of a leader, and various one-point lessons. But now we're going to bring it together, and I'd really love for that conversation to be more of a conversation. So I'm going to actually change that one from a webinar, and I'm going to see if I can change it to a meeting. So if you would like, you can even turn on your camera. If you don't, you can just show up by audio. That's okay too. But so we can have more of an interaction and have a conversation around how it all comes together to really bring about the results that you want to have in your life. In your work life, in your personal life, all of that. Okay, so let's dig into this be there-ship. So I know this is kind of a strange word. I made this up, so it's not a word that you probably have heard any other place. So leadership starts with be there-ship, and the point here is that you want to be there for your people. There are 4 dimensions. We're on page 147. There are 4 dimensions to be there-ship, and really only one of them has to do with being there physically. So I will cover that, but I recognize that in this day and age, basically what we've got going on right now, we may not be able to be there in person with people, right? But what I've found is that regardless of that, you can still be in somebody's world. So the other 3 dimensions that we're going to cover really can be very easily met through virtual means, kind of like we're doing right now. I know I'm in my basement studio right now. I know I've come to you from my office in the past right now. I did a keynote a couple of nights ago, had a couple of sessions yesterday, so we decided to just kind of leave this setup. But when we're together, we're having a conversation like this. To me, my experience has been that I've been able to connect to my clients just as well. Now, would I like to see them in person and, shake their hand or whatever? Yes, absolutely. That would be wonderful. But in the absence of it, I think you can still be there for somebody. So now let's first talk about the sort of the physical aspect of being there. So this is the first dimension of be there-ship on page 147. So in here, what I do is I talk about the example of a plant manager when I was sort of growing up in my career, if you will. And I just started, so plant manager was one of these roles that was like way up there. I never thought, wow, will I ever get there? And one day I noticed that the plant manager who had this really beautiful corner office came down to the hallway where I was, and usually we shared offices with 3 or 4 people, and he basically just camped out at one of the desks. And for the first few days, people were like, what the heck is he doing? Is he spying on us or whatever else? But after a while, it really opened up some doors for people to have conversations with him. So we felt really close to him. Now, years later, what I did was I did something similar in that I moved my office to a dark and dingy office in the middle of the plant. And eventually, one of the other things that I did was I had this roll-around cart that was built. It was only a couple of $100 worth, and I would roll it around the various locations in the manufacturing plant, and I would just camp out. I had a little stool, and I had a license plate on there that said Georgia on my mind, but it also said interrupt me. Right? Because I wanted people to interrupt me. I wanted them to feel that I was there for them to make sure that I could get into their world. Now, this is a concept that the Japanese called Gemba. Right? Gemba means basically going where the action is. Instead of sitting in the office and talking about something that's happening out there, actually go there. Or in the case of an office situation, instead of sending somebody emails or whatever, let's get together, let's have a conversation closer to the action. And let's talk to the frontline people who know more about the situation. So physically being there, it really makes a difference. One of my favorite shows that I also mention in the book is Undercover Boss. Right, and it's one of those things where it's always wonderful to see when bosses or leaders take the time to actually spend time with folks, get into their world, and physically be there and do the work to understand how things are going for them. So this is the first aspect of be there-ship. Now there are three other ones, and the next one is called be available. Now whether you are there physically or not, be available. Right? So let me just read from page 149, just read a quick excerpt here. Make sure that your people know you are available to them and that they know how to reach you if they need you. This is a simple thing. It is important for them to be self-directed and to know that you don't want to rescue them every time they get into a situation that could bring them some growth and development. However, it is equally important for them to know that if they need you when you're not physically present, they have license to reach out to you and that you will get back to them at your earliest convenience. Now, I have to tell you this, I have experienced this many, many times in my career when folks called me up in the middle of the night and to say, hey, you know what, here's what's going on and all that. Now, in some cases, I wasn't necessarily the most qualified person to answer that question, but maybe they were calling out of courtesy and all of this. And that also gave me an opportunity to say, look, you have the authority to make that decision. That's okay. And then next time what you can do is just tell me what you did next day. Or in some cases, like, wow, I'm so glad you called me because we were able to put our heads together. So when people reach out to you, I think it's an opportunity to either empower them or answer their question, or in case of things where you are uniquely qualified to do something, then make it happen. So that's the other aspect, be available. And I also mentioned in the book, again on page 149, that some people feel like if you make yourself too accessible, that's not a good thing, because then people will disregard chain of command. They'll come right to you with all their problems. And my experience, at least, has been that that's not the case. About 95% of the people are not going to abuse that. Will somebody do that from time to time? Hey, I have a direct line to the big boss and I'm going to call him about. Yeah, but that gives you an opportunity to do some calibration. But that's only a small percentage of people. Not everybody is going to abuse it. So I would encourage you not to be afraid to make yourself available. So let me pause again for a second to see if we have any questions or comments. Again, I want to make sure that this stuff is real for you, right? So David, do we have anything?
Nothing right now.
Okay. All right. Looks like something's coming in. Yep. I see from a distance that there is a chat coming in. Maybe is that something we need to cover?
Okay. Jill asked, what about leading in the virtual workspace?
Yeah, leading. Yeah. That's a very good question and very relevant today, right? And how do you make yourself available? First of all, obviously with the first aspect of this being physically present, you can't be there, although you can go pretty much accomplish a lot of that. A lot of people are using video. It's wise to know when to use video and when not to. Honestly, I always give people an option to do video or audio, because sometimes people are like, look, basically I got 50,000 things going on. I'm homeschooling the kids and all that. I haven't even combed my hair. Right now, I don't have that problem, but some other people do, right? So I'm like, okay, if you want to do video, jump on this. If you want to do audio, just call me. However, when it comes to being available, I think it can be accomplished virtually, in my mind, to let people know, to just basically, first of all, declare that, hey, this is my phone number, feel free to call me, so on and so forth. But then Also, occasionally reach out to them to make sure that they know that you understand some of the things they're dealing with. It's like, hey, how did that thing go? Is there anything I can support you with? Because sometimes people may be hesitant. You give them your number, but they're like, I don't want to really bother that person, especially if you're the boss. But so you got to kind of get them into that habit. So I found that being available can be done virtually as well. Like, call me anytime you need. Anything else, Naveed? Thank you. Thank you so much, Jill, by the way. Appreciate it.
John had a similar question. He asked, any additional suggestions or brainstorming on how to be there in the current COVID social distancing environment? As in talking from 6 feet away with a mask in a noisy environment can be challenging.
Yeah, and that's, I'm going to get into the other couple of things, and then I'll come back and make a couple of suggestions on that. Thank you so much, John, because it is a very different situation now, right? But I do think that as we get into these next dimensions of be there-ship, that you'll see some opportunities to get into their world, even in this day and age. So if I could, I'll go into that and we'll make sure that we cover this. So the third dimension is be in their world, right? So be in their world. Some people, my experience, as I say in the book, is that some people communicate like a TV set. Basically, I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I'd be having a conversation with someone, and while they're talking to me, they're looking around, they're thinking about something else, and they're not really in my world, right? Whereas if you want to be in somebody's world, you've got to really listen, not just with your ears, but with your eyes and with your heart to see what's going on. Now, if you're doing that virtually, you can also do that, right? Because what you can do is really get in touch with the issues that they're dealing with and ask some questions, open-ended questions that will cause them to share with you. Hey, I know that you had this big project, this presentation going on yesterday, and I know you're doing that virtually, so it's a bit harder to get in touch with what's going on. How did that go for you? That's an open-ended question that causes the person to be able to express an emotion. Say, you know what, I felt really good about that. Or, I'm not really sure how that went. I could really use some help in getting a read. If you could do that for me. You see, you got to get into people's world and to prime the pump, if you will. You want to ask them some questions about what's going on. You want to know something about them so you can sort of cause them to open up to you. I always say, whether I'm talking in front of 5 people or 3,000 people, I always try to get into people's world as much as I can. Obviously, when I'm in front of a group of 3,000 people, I can't see everybody, but I most certainly get into the world of all the faces that I can see. I look around and see if I'm making a point and I see a few people kind of going like what's he talking about? Then I may say something like, hey, I know that some of you are puzzled with this thing I just said. You're thinking, what the heck is this guy thinking? And then I see a smile on their face like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Then I address that. You see, that is what makes you a more effective communicator. In fact, I'm very, very clear that if I ever lose my voice, my ability to speak, I can still be an effective speaker. But if I ever lose my eyesight, I honestly don't know if I can be as effective as I am today. Because I rely so much on reading people to see what's going on. So being in people's world means just that. You get into their world. I say on page 150, the ability to practice this leadership attribute goes beyond the techniques and skills of listening and interacting. It has to do with genuinely valuing people enough to be interested in their triumphs and challenges. It is not about sympathy, but empathy. It is not so much about the quantity of contact, but the quality of every interface. So, again, to John's point, if we're doing this virtually and we don't have this opportunity to be around people all the time, we can still make meaningful connection. Look, I even have a hypothesis that may not be totally intuitive, but I predict that this whole virtual environment is going to bring teams closer together. And here's why I say that. Because I've come across so many teams who have worked together for many, many years, and they have this false sense of closeness. Oh yeah, I've worked with this person for 15 years. But you know what? We have transactionships. We don't have relationships. But now that we are working virtually, perhaps we're a little bit more conscious of making those connections. And you know what? My experience is this, that when I'm close to somebody, and even if I don't talk to them, I have this group of friends that I've known for like 41 years. And from time to time, we don't talk for weeks or sometimes months. When I was living overseas, I didn't see them. The only connection was on the phone and all this kind of stuff. But when we get together, it's just like, whether it's on the phone or in person, it's just like it was yesterday, right? We can pick up where we left off. So this whole connection thing can also happen virtually. So let me pause for a second and see what we got. Anything, Avi?
Suresh has a comment that says, I agree that virtual teams will be closer. We have seen a 38% increase in engagement after going virtual.
Fantastic. Really, real life data right there. And I've actually seen that in some of my clients as well. And that they've now gone out of their way to put some systems in place, some processes in place, and people are more conscious of actually getting close to each other. Thank you so much, Suresh, and congratulations for that. That's awesome.
No other comments.
Okay,
right now.
Great. And so let's get into the fourth dimension of this be theirship. The fourth dimension is sort of again, another side of this, which says when you do all of those things, it causes people to know that you are there for them. Be there for them. What does that mean? That means that they know they can count on you. They know that whether you're there physically or not, whether you're talking to them or not, whatever the situation is, when the going gets tough, if they feel that they need to tap into your expertise or your support or whatever it is, that you are there for them. Be there for them. I have to tell you that one of the things that I always remember in my career is that many, many years ago, I had one of my employees who called me in the middle of the night because he and his wife were dealing with a traumatic situation. They were at the hospital, and he called me up. And I'm like, wow. So he's calling me instead of family and all of this. And later, many years later, there was a husband and wife team that worked in my workplace, and they found out sadly that their son had passed away, and I was the first person they called. And I don't say this to say I am such a great leader or whatnot, but what I'm saying to you is that it really makes a difference when, I'll just read from the book on page 151. So I don't bring these up to boast about my leadership abilities, but to say that when something like that happens, and you can see that what you have invested in a relationship has paid off in the form of trust and respect, there is no breaking that bond. And so what you need is, when you invest in relationships like that, then what you get is a bond that cannot be broken. When people know that you are there for them. And guess what? One of the benefits that you get from that, and again, you ought to do it for the right reasons, simply because it's right to do. But one of the business benefits that we get is, guess what? When there's a problem, and if somebody knows that I'll be there for them, they will bring it to my attention rather than just kind of look the other way and say, you know what? I don't even want to deal with this. Somebody else will deal with it. So it makes a difference. So let me read the bottom line real quick on page 151 and 152. Leadership is about being there for those who are counting on you to lead them. Being there can be demonstrated in a variety of ways, the culmination of which creates a solid foundation on which transformative leaders build engagement and loyalty. And if you are in a large organization, let me tell you something. Even if you don't get to physically be with everybody, or you don't get to even have them on video or have a conversation, word gets around. The same way that, when somebody is mistreated, they let other people know, hey, this is what this person did to me. When you have shown loyalty, when you show that you are there for them, they will show loyalty by actually letting other people know. Let me tell you something. Way back when this happened, I know that that person was there for me, and word will get out, and you will build that reputation, and it will do you a ton of good. And so the recommended, let me just, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in. I'm just going to go over the recommended action plan. So assess yourself against the dimensions of the leadership, and identify what you're doing well and where you need to do better. And, this is your own judgment, not somebody else's. But if you want to ask other people questions about how well you're doing, by all means, do that. Be intentional about identifying behaviors that you are going to begin exhibiting. So be intentional. What does it mean? If you say, look, I really want to be there for people, well, what are you going to do to actually demonstrate that? So identify that and be intentional about it. And finally, publicly declare your assessment and your intentions. That's really powerful because, look, you may be feeling bad because you might say, well, I haven't really been there for people. Now, all of a sudden, if I begin to act this way, they're going to think that I'm faking it, or I went to some seminar and drank some Kool-Aid and all of this. Well, you know what? The best way to kind of break that ice is to just be straight about it. Look, I've done some thinking, and I just realized that I really haven't been there for you guys. And my intention is to do better. And these are the things that I'm expecting myself to do. And I would like you to be my accountability partner to make sure that I follow through. That's really the best way to break with the past and create something new. So let me pause again and see if we have any questions or comments.
Nothing right now.
Okay. Sounds good. All righty. So with that then, let's go ahead and go to the next chapter, lesson 20. This is the last chapter in the book, last one-point lesson on page 201. And it's simply called Just Be It. Now, I'm sure you have heard of Just Do It. But I think oftentimes we put a lot of stock in doing, but we don't pay much attention to who we're being and how we're showing up. And yes, doing is what actually gets the results, but if you want to do the right kinds of things, you have to know that it flows out of who you're being. So we're going to dig into this in this lesson, okay? So the quote that I have up top on page 201 says, I am. Two of the most powerful words, for what you put after them shapes your reality. How you relate to yourself as who you are shapes your reality, because your behavior and ultimately your results will flow out of that. So, we talked, when we talked about commitment, 100% commitment, we also touched on attachment. And this is partially what I also kind of re-emphasize in this lesson around commitment versus attachment. But I want to bring out another sort of way of describing that, in that, for example, as a refresher on the attachment piece. Let's just say, let's not use a hypothetical example. Let's just use a real life example from my life, right? Several months ago, it was probably been about a year now, I decided that I was going to lose some weight. And I went to extraordinary measures to do some things, and took some extraordinary measures to, I don't know, it was all carrot sticks and juice and no chocolate and whatever else. And after a few weeks, after about 3-4 weeks, I think it was, I finally decided to get on the scale to see how I had done. then I looked down and saw that I had gained a couple of pounds. And at that moment, it was really tough for me to stay in action. Why? Because I'm like, I could have had Twinkies every night for dinner and would have still done better. What the heck? And that is the defining moment. And that is when we give up on our commitment because we are attached to the results. We say, look, I should have gotten these kind of results by now. I've done X, Y, and Z, and I should have these results. But because I don't have those results and I don't like my circumstances, then they impact my attitude and essentially they derail my progress. And so, what I often talk about is leaders have their ABCs in order. Transformative leaders have their ABCs together in order. And what does that stand for? A stands for attitude, B stands for behavior, and C stands for circumstance. And generally speaking, we go the other way. We go CBA. The default mode is we look at our circumstances, we're disappointed, we begin to behave according to that disappointment, we react to stuff, and we're just kind of doing things that don't really help us. And then ultimately we're frustrated, who we're being, and our attitudes is one of frustration and disappointment. So CBA, circumstances drive behaviors and then they drive attitude. The right way to do it is to catch yourself when that happens and go the other way, ABC. You decide what your attitude is going to be and then behave according to that attitude and then create the circumstances that you want to create. Now, I say on page 202, you might be thinking, it is hard to do this. And I won't deny that. This is not, nobody said it's easy. Accomplishing extraordinary things is not always easy. Ultimately, yes, it is worth it. But, I can't deny that. But assuming that you remain committed to the cause, it can be done. There are all kinds of, folks that we've heard about, read about in history. We're talking about Gandhi, Helen Keller, Nelson Mandela, countless people who have had challenges, but they remained committed in the face of issues and concerns and setbacks. So let me read from page 202 and top of 203. Let's use a scenario where you want to lose a few pounds. Well, I actually went ahead and told you that. So let me go to page 203 where I say, well, we think somebody is generous when they're giving because they are rich. This is a point where I make is like, look, when you look at Warren Buffett and you hear that he has given away millions of dollars, you might say, wait a minute, of course he can do it. He can be generous because he's rich. But what doesn't occur to us is that they may be rich because they have a giving spirit and that they were probably giving generously even when they didn't have so much money. So what does this mean? If you want ultimately to have a certain circumstance, as in like be rich, be fit, be successful, why don't you go and be, right now, in this moment, be the kind of person that would ultimately get you to that point. Don't wait until, I'll be generous when I have money. I tell you what, if one day when I get really fit, I go to the gym, but right now it's really hard for me to do it because I'm out of shape and all this. But that doesn't make any sense, right? What you want to do is you want to begin to be that person, have that attitude, take on that way of being so that you can become whatever it is that you want to become. So, one of the things examples at the bottom of page 203 that I bring up is a friend of mine was looking for a job. So he was an operations manager, just one level below manufacturing, plant manager, and he was looking for a job. And he was going on interviews and it was going well, but he wasn't getting the offer. So I gave him one piece of advice that literally worked. During his next interview, he was offered a job. And the advice was this. I said, look, when you walk into the interview, don't be the operations manager who wishes and hopes to be a plant manager someday. Walk in being the plant manager. Now, you may not have the job yet, you may not have the authority, you may not get the paycheck yet or whatever, but be that. Just sort of project that. Be that person who is already there. If you are turned down for a promotion, guess what? You can either be disappointed and begin to prove people right, to say, hey, you know what, I'm glad we didn't promote this person. Or you could act like you have been promoted. Now, you may not be able to write a check that you don't have authority for. You may not be able to act rich, like go spend $1 million when you only have $1,000 in the bank. That's not what I mean. What I mean is your attitude and the way you carry yourself and who you're being and how you're showing up can be that way already. You see, the benefit of this, and this is something that Naveed and I have talked from time to time, it's a very important point. The question is this, the question that you want to ask yourself at some point at the bottom of page 202 is, if you were fit and thin, in the case of a goal that you've set to be fit, if you were that already, would you want to go back to being out of shape? If you were there already, would you do or not do? What would you do or not do to maintain what you had? If you were already there, you see, if I need to lose 20 pounds, it's hard for me to do it. Why? Because I'm doing these things, but I haven't really lost that weight. Oh, I went to the gym 3 more times, and look at me, I'm still out of shape. But here's the question: if you were there already, would you want to get back to where you are right now? And if not, what would you be willing to do? What would you be willing to stop doing to get there? And this is why it's so important to be that now and say, look, you know what? I'm on a path to get there, and no matter what, I'm going to stay with it. Now, from time to time, you may want to check your strategy to say, okay, maybe I need to employ other strategies. But don't give up on the idea simply because you're not getting what you want right now, immediately. So, let's see. So let me just kind of get over to the bottom line here, and then see if we have any questions or comments. Please keep those coming. So the bottom line says, we act according to how we relate to ourselves. If we relate to ourselves with limited thinking about what's possible, we act according to it and bring it about. But if we envision ourselves having already achieved what we are targeting for, we behave according to that and bring about a different outcome. Imagine yourself there already. Who would you be? How would you be? How would you show up? How would you generate yourself in that situation? Because that's the kind of being that is required to get you from where you are to where you want to be. So let me pause for a moment. See if we have any questions, comments.
Okay, we have a question from Susan. It's about the previous OPL.
Okay.
And she says, our organization has been virtual since March 19th.
Okay.
My leader didn't reach out to me for 2 weeks, nor did the rest of the staff.
Yeah.
I was the first to reach out, but I still do not get any others from my immediate team reaching back. How do you get them to reach back?
So this may be difficult. It may be a tough road here. First of all, I commend you for taking that step. And you know, one thing I want to share with you right now is that because there are so many different challenges that people are facing, even people who under normal circumstances would do a good job of communicating may have some difficulty right now because of the circumstances that are going on with them. So sometimes when this happens, we begin to sort of blame those folks and all this, and when in fact there could be something very legitimate going on with them, be it their health or their priorities, whatever else. So first of all, I just wanted to preface that by saying that. So assuming that there's no major situation going on and they're just not communicating, the suggestions that I would make is, first of all, make sure that the communication that you're doing is aimed at supporting them and helping them. So even if they're not reaching out to you, I would make sure that your communication is aimed at, hey, what can I do for you, and things like this. The second thing that I would say in circumstances like this is that if the contact me as you need to, or talking on as needed basis doesn't work, I like the idea of setting up some sort of a regularly scheduled meeting where we touch base anyway. Now, I wouldn't overdo it. There are some companies that are doing this like every morning and every night to make sure that people are not slacking off and they're working actually at home and stuff. I'm not suggesting that, but it's like, hey, why don't we touch base every week for about half an hour just to kind of see what's going on and how you're doing, how I'm doing, things like that. So, I would still try to kind of hang in there with that and still take the responsibility to say, you know what, if it's to be, it's up to me. Something is going on over there that I don't understand. So thank you so much, Susan. These are a couple of suggestions that I would make.
Okay, and we have a comment from John. He says, how you show up in a room matters. Reminds me of the quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you're saying. And Maya Angelou says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Made them feel, exactly.
You may not always be able to help people change their circumstances, but you can always help them change their attitude and behavior.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Thank you so much, John.
Let me see. Belinda was asking, what page were you just on?
I was on page 2, the last page of, it was page 204. Yeah. Page 204 is the last page of 1 point lesson 20. Just be it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Michael had a question. What about people who don't know who or what they want to become? How should they approach it?
Well, first of all, there are some people who don't know what they want, don't know what they want to become, and all of this, and they don't even know that they don't know, and they don't want to know. In that case, I hope that they're surrounded by some people who would entice them to become interested, right? But if there's someone who doesn't know what they want to become, but they recognize it and they actually want to make progress, my suggestion is that is not it's a very active and participative sort of undertaking. You can't just wait until your purpose becomes clear to you. What you have to do is try different things to see what really resonates with you. I think I'm a good example of that. With a master's in mechanical engineering, starting out in a manufacturing plant as a maintenance manager, and who I am right now and what I do, this was a series of course corrections for me, constantly trying to sort of do different things and find where my passion lies. So if you are someone who doesn't know exactly who you want to become and what you want to do, ultimately, begin to at least experiment with different things, whether it's on a voluntary basis or different ways of doing your job or something like that, so you can begin to feel whether something feels right to you or not. And you'll get a lot more insight out of trying different things in that direction.
Okay, and we had a comment on Facebook from Lambros. He says, love the messages this week. I could definitely use some more work here. Hearing versus listening and being 100% engaged. Being in their world is difficult with all the distractions and will take 100% commitment.
Yes. Great, Lambros. Thank you so much. That is true. Look, anything worthwhile, anything worth achieving is going to require commitment from you. So especially nowadays when we're dealing with so many challenges that we haven't dealt with in our lifetime, it requires you, if you want to make something happen for yourself and others, to be all in, be 100% committed. And I'm not suggesting you overstretch yourself and commit to everything to everybody, because that's one sure way of ultimately having 50-50 commitments. But be clear about what you are committed to, and then hang in there with it. When the going gets tough, don't just look at your circumstances. Walk by faith, if you will, not just looking at whatever's right in front of you, act on your commitment, not your attachment. And that's what it takes. At the end of the day, when we look back at this pandemic or any challenge that might come up in your situation, when you look back, when it's all said and done, it's always clear who were the people who, in spite of their own challenges and issues, were able to rise to the occasion, were willing to rise to the occasion and support everybody else and bring that attitude, bring that positive energy, as opposed to just not taking responsibility and sort of sucking the oxygen out of the air, if you will.
Okay, no more comments so far.
Okay. Got it. So again, just a few more things that I want to cover with us in the few minutes that we have left. What we have done over the course of these last 5 sessions, and by the way, most of you know, but if you have missed any of those, we are going to actually leave those videos up on the website, theganadgroup.com/book-study. We're going to leave these videos for about 3 more weeks on that site. And then at that point, we're going to basically pull them into our On the Court Leadership site, onthecourtleadership.com. So what we've done is we've covered in the first session what it takes to create what I call a high commitment culture. And we talked briefly about the attitude and the mindset of leaders, the behavior of leaders who create those kinds of things. Not just the top leaders, but leaders can be all over the place in the organization at various levels. And then for the past 4 sessions, we got into basically 2 one-point lessons, and we've covered 8 out of 20 in the book in the last 4 sessions. And what we're going to do next week is we're going to have a bonus session where we talk about how it all comes together, and it's going to be very interactive and kind of a coaching style, if you will, and we'll make that as interactive as we possibly can to see how it all comes together. Now, the one thing that I failed to mention on this last lesson, just be it, there's only one follow-up action that I recommend on page 205, is to complete the exercise titled Restoring Power in the appendix. So Restoring Power asks you several questions, the answers to which will actually take you from a place of, if you're being down and defeated and disappointed and all of this, and if you want to re-energize yourself, these questions that I have in Restoring Power, and I'll read a couple of them to you. What's not working or is not working as well as you want it to? What is your commitment in that area? What will it look like exactly when you get there? Think of a time that this was going well. How were you actually feeling? It could be excited, energized, motivated. Now, what is keeping you from being that way now? In other words, what complaints do you have? Well, I could be energized if it wasn't for these knuckleheads. I could be, enthusiastic if it wasn't for this situation. What is it that you have complaints about? And what unmet expectations do you have? And are you willing to set those aside and generate yourself? So this Restoring Power is going to help you actually restore your way of being to a way of being that is conducive to you delivering the kind of results and experiencing the kind of fulfillment that you want to create. Okay, now I want to just kind of step back for the next few minutes and talk a little bit about the overall context again of this book and sort of where we're going from here. Look, this book was a labor of love. Okay, at the end of the day, this was written based on all the experiences that I'd had over the years, and most importantly, the experience I had in the course of a few years that I was dealing with a very tough challenge. And the whole point of it was to make sure that if I can actually cause people to see something that they couldn't see before and set them free from some of the hidden saboteurs that are acting on them, then I should do that. And so the book is really not a set of prescriptions, but it's something to cause you to think about certain things and come up with certain answers. But what I also recognize, though, is that it's not about reading a book. It's not about going through your LinkedIn feed or your Facebook feed and you read these statements and you like them and you share them. You might even make a comment. Of course, that's appreciated, right? Because it's good to spread the positive word and so on and so forth. But even that is not necessarily it. I see some of the people who have been showing up to this book study every week. Now, I'm not faulting anyone who hasn't been able to go to every week. I know many of you have communicated and you said, hey, you know what, I'll watch the recording. But there are so many of you that I'm so appreciative for. Because you know what? You have actually put some skin in the game. You said, you know what? I am dedicating an hour a week for the next 5 weeks because I want to be part of this conversation. And I want to not just randomly say, oh yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, this is good. That's good. But I'm going to be engaged. I'm going to participate. I'm going to actually take something and use it and see how it works. And then come back, ask questions, make comments, contribute to this community. That's what it's about. So some of the most effective sessions that I do involve community. It's not just knowledge transfer, but really being part of a community that is speaking a language of transformation. And so that is what we have created in onthecourtleadership.com. And this is what I want to really emphasize here, that this is only for people who want to continue to be in that community and have the conversation as we have been for the last 5 weeks and then 7 weeks before that for Destined to Thrive series. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if you have not done so, go ahead and get on that waiting list. It doesn't obligate you to do anything other than it tells us if you have remotely any interest in that. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you get the right kind of information around what's going on. We're going to launch this officially in a few weeks. But before we do that, we're going to kind of do something special for our inner circle, if you will, to make sure that you guys have first dibs and you get real clear, you have certain access and so on and so forth. So if you have not gotten on that list, and if you have an interest, please do that. I don't want you to hear this as some kind of sales pitch or whatever, because if you're not interested, then you're not interested, and that's fine. But if you are, make sure, if you're not on that list, please go ahead and do that. And what we're going to do is, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to go ahead and send you an email in the next day or two that is going to talk about next week's session, as well as give you a little bit more information about this. And if you want to continue to receive communication from us, by all means, that's wonderful. We'd love to have you. If not, go all the way to the bottom where it says unsubscribe and do that, and we honor your choice on that as well. So let me pause for a moment and see, Naveed, if we have any other questions or comments.
Jill says, thank you for hosting these weekly leadership series. And Suresh says, absolutely enjoyed the series. Covered a broad range of leadership qualities in a simple and effective format. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Jill and Suresh. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. It really makes a difference for me to, I do this kind of thing all the time. I'm making videos all the time and all of this, but there is a certain spirit in this forum that makes it really special to me. Even though I'm looking at a camera right now, you see the connection is there. I feel like the Be There-ship is alive and well because you're there for me. When I show up in this space, I show up as a member of this community, and I am so grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Susan also echoed their comment. She said, these sessions have been so great. Thank you.
Very welcome. Absolutely welcome. Now, what I would really, again, encourage you to do is, don't get overwhelmed by all the lessons that are in this book and all this kind of stuff. Even if you, over the course of last 8 OPLs that we covered, even if you just pick one, right? Just pick 1 or 2 things and begin to be intentional about it and say, you know what? I'm going to take this for a test drive regularly in my life. Over the course of next week, I'm going to watch myself. and I'm going to observe who I'm being. How am I showing up? And every time I'm showing up as down and defeated and low energy and all of this, I'm going to think about the outcome that I'm excited about, and I'm going to generate myself, and I'm going to show up as that. And if you make that course correction 100 times, guess what? Ultimately, it becomes second nature for you. But at the beginning of it, it requires some intentionality. So I would really encourage you to pick something and begin to practice it. And next week, we'll talk a lot more about sort of the practical aspects of how you can bring all of this to your life, again, professionally or personally, and get the most out of it. All right, and I'm pausing, Naveed. I wanted to make sure if there are any other comments or questions.
A few more comments. Michael said, "For my team, these sessions have created the common language of transformation. Thank you so much."
Very welcome, Michael. Thank you.
And Monroe says, thank you, Amir, for reinforcing that being a leader also means being human. I find it helpful in my interactions with others that the first 1 to 2 minutes are spent asking the person how they are really doing overall versus just jumping into discussing work. And Rosita said, I have become addicted to these sessions. Almost had a panic attack yesterday when I thought I missed you.
Yes. No, I got your message, Rosita. So grateful that you're here. And I have to tell you, I appreciate the comments. And I have to tell you, Monroe, particularly at the risk of making Monroe blush right now, I have watched him do that because we were together in California a few months ago. And it's like, if Monroe asks you how you're doing, he's not going to settle for, yeah, I'm fine. How about you? He's going to talk to you for a moment. No, how are you really doing? And it's a wonderful thing because I clearly sensed from everybody that he interacted with that they felt that he was in their world and truly interested in them, in their life. So wonderful comment. Great ads. Thank you so much for that.
That's it for comments.
All right. Sounds great. Now, I know that many of you have, your teams actually are now going through a book study. You've purchased books, and I have a book study format that I'm happy to share with you. And again, I'm not trying to sell you books or whatever, but what I'm saying to you is if you want to take your team through some version of this book study and instill this language in your culture, then by all means get in touch with me because I have not only a book study format, but I can help you sort of tweak that. And after a half-hour conversation, I've done this enough to be able to suggest different variations of this that you can do on your own. And of course, I'm also happy to support you with that. Just reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. Sometimes people feel like, well, I see you got this going on and I see this on your website. I feel like, Amir's too busy. And I'm always telling people, look, I'm not too busy. Send me an email. I'll find some time and all of that. So by all means, we are members of the same community. So please do get in touch and let me know if I can support you in any way. Otherwise, I really hope to see you here next week. Again, and same time, bonus session, and it's going to be all bringing it all together. And I also hope to see you on the court. So, any other final comments? We got 2 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up and stop recording. I'll still hang around. If there are any of you who want to hang around, we're welcome to do that. Any other comments, Naveed?
Yeah, we had 2 more comments. Keith said the 100% commitment is working. I have taken on building a team with the maintenance group. Even mostly working from home, I have made a difference just by declaring my intent and living up to conversations, mostly over the phone. It works.
Fantastic.
And awesome. Joy said, thank you again for a great session.
Very welcome. And thank you all. And I'm so grateful for you being here. All right. If there's nothing else, Naveed, I'll give you the final word. And then what we'll do is we'll stop the recording on this end, and I'll still hang around if there are any other questions.
We just had another comment come in. Pam said, thank you for providing the recordings. A great opportunity to revisit your coaching.
Very welcome. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the first video on that page. but the rest of them will keep them available for 3 weeks. So if you want to do some binge watching, or you want to recommend it to somebody or whatnot, please do that for 3 weeks. But what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and move a lot of things. We're going to put a great deal of emphasis, our energy and time and effort into onthecourtleadership.com, because that's going to be our community that is declared, that says, you know what, I'm all in. And we've got all kinds of things going on with that group. And I can give you a little bit more detail on that next week as well. With that, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point. And I'll hang around if there are any other questions or comments.